Welcome to Creative Imperfections. I'm Kelly, and I am so glad you're here. Think of this podcast as your safe place to be your beautifully messy self. Let's dive in. Today, I want to talk about one of the smallest words in the English language that somehow manages to carry the weight of 1,000 pounds. The word should. If you're anything like me, you've probably spent a good portion of your life shoulding all over yourself. You should be further along. You should have figured this out by now. You should be more productive. You should be exercising more. You should be posting more. You should be making more money. You should be happier. You should have started sooner. You should know better. You should. It's amazing, isn't it? One little word can turn an ordinary Tuesday into a courtroom drama where you're somehow the defendant, the prosecutor, and the judge all at the same time. And the worst part is that most of us don't even notice we're doing it. We think we're motivating ourselves. We think we're holding ourselves accountable. We think we're setting a higher standard. But often, what we're actually doing is carrying around a backpack full of expectations that were never ours to begin with. I started noticing this recently while listening to conversations people were having, including conversations I was having with myself. Everywhere I turned, there it was. I should really get my life together. I should be more organized. I should have launched that thing already. I should be further along than this. And I started wondering, according to who? Who created this magical timeline that everyone seems to be measuring themselves against? Where is this official rule book that says by a certain age, income level, career stage, relationship status, or life circumstance, you're supposed to have everything figured out? Because I've looked around quite a bit and I have yet to find a single person who actually has it all figured out. Not one. Some people are just better at hiding the mess. That's it. We live in a world right now where everyone gets to see everyone else's highlight reel. We see booking announcements, but not the 400 auditions that came before it. We see the new business launch, but not the months of doubt, mistakes, and second guessing that happened behind the scenes. We see the smiling family photo, but not the argument that happened 10 minutes before it. Then we compare our behind the scenes footage to someone else's trailer. And somehow we decide we're behind. A few years ago, I realized something very interesting. I realized that most of my stress wasn't coming from what was actually happening in my life. It was coming from my resistance to what was happening. The reality might have been manageable, but then I'd pile a bunch of shoulds on top of it. I should be handling this better. I should have anticipated this. I should be able to fix this faster. I should know exactly what to do. And suddenly, one challenge became five. It's kind of like spilling coffee on your shirt. Super annoying. But then imagine spending the next 3 hours yelling at yourself because you spilled coffee. Now you're not just dealing with a stain, you're carrying frustration and judgment, embarrassment, self criticism. The coffee wasn't the real problem anymore. The story became the problem. And that's exactly what should does. Should creates stories. It takes the present moment and immediately compares it to an imaginary version of reality that doesn't exist. Here's what I've learned. Should is often judgment that we think is guidance because it sounds productive, it sounds responsible even. But underneath it is usually a message that says, you are not enough as you are. And that's a dangerous message to repeat to yourself every day, especially as creatives and entrepreneurs, just as human beings, because growth thrives in encouragement. Think about how you'd encourage a child learning to ride a bike. Imagine they're wobbling down the street, trying their best, and they fall. You wouldn't run over and say, you should already know how to do this. You should be riding faster. You should stop making mistakes. Of course not. You'd say, you're learning, get back up, try again, you're doing great, keep going. Somewhere along the line, we stop offering ourselves that same grace. We become adults and suddenly think criticism is the path to improvement. But most of the time, criticism just creates exhaustion. One of my favorite questions to ask myself now is, what if there is no should here? What if there is only what is? What if instead of arguing with reality, I simply accepted where I am and focused on what comes next? Because here's the thing, acceptance is not surrender, acceptance is clarity. It's saying, okay, this is where I am. Now what? And that is where your power is at. Not wishing you were somewhere else, not replaying what should have happened, not obsessing over how far you still have to go. Your power lives in the next choice, the next action, the next conversation, the next audition, the next chapter. I've noticed something fascinating about people who build extraordinary lives. They don't spend all day thinking about where they should be. They're too busy working with where they are. They don't argue with the starting point, they use that. If you're a voice actor listening to this, maybe you think you should be booking more. Maybe you should have an agent. You should have a better demo. You should have started 10 years ago. Okay, maybe. But none of those thoughts will help you today, right now. What helps you today is simply asking, what is the next right step? Send the email, take the class, record the audition, update the website, practice a skill, make the call. That is where momentum comes from, not from judgment, from action. I think that's one of the biggest lessons life keeps teaching me over and over again. The goal isn't to become someone who never makes mistakes. The goal is to become someone who spends less time arguing with reality and more time participating and working with it. Because life is messy. Careers are messy, relationships are messy, growth is messy. That's not a flaw in the system. That just is the system. And every time we tell ourselves we should be beyond the mess, we're missing the whole point. The mess is where the learning happens. The uncertainty is where the growth happens. The imperfect middle is where the magic happens, which is a pretty fitting reminder for a podcast called Creative Imperfections, right? So this week, I want to challenge you to become aware of your shoulds. Just notice them. Don't judge them. Don't try to eliminate them. Just notice. When you hear yourself say, I should, pause. Then try replacing it. I should be further along becomes I'm still growing. I should know what I'm doing becomes I'm learning. I should have done better becomes I learned something valuable. I should be somewhere else becomes this is where I am and this is where I begin. It's a small shift, but it can make a massive difference because one version creates shame while the other creates possibility. If you're carrying around a heavy pile of shoulds today, maybe it's time to set some of them down. Not because you've given up, not because you don't care or you're lowering your standards, but because you're choosing to move forward with compassion instead of criticism. You're choosing progress over punishment. You're choosing reality over fantasy. And you're choosing trust that your story is unfolding exactly the way stories unfold, one imperfect chapter at a time. So if you need permission to stop shoulding all over yourself, consider this it. Thank you for listening to Creative Imperfections. Always remember, there's magic in the mess. If you enjoyed this episode, share it, subscribe, and keep showing up for your beautifully imperfect journey. Until next time.